I don't really like telling this story, but I feel like if I don't, it'll eat me up. I still can't go hiking alone anymore. Hell, even when I go with someone, I constantly look over my shoulder. It happened 2 years ago, but it still haunts me. I live in a small town in West Virginia, surrounded by forests, hills, and hiking trails. I grew up exploring the woods, so I never had any fear of being alone out there. That changed one weekend in late September. I decided to take a solo trip to a remote trail about an hour from my house. It wasn't well known, which made it perfect. I wanted some peace and quiet, just me and nature. I parked my car at the small gravel lot near the entrance, grabbed my backpack and headed in. It was supposed to be a simple 4-mile loop. I was about 2 miles in when I first noticed something off. It was that strange, skin-prickling feeling that someone was watching me. I turned around, scanning the trees, but saw nothing. The woods were silent, aside from the occasional rustling of leaves. I shrugged it off and kept going. A few minutes later, I heard something behind me, a twig snapping. I stopped, listened. The air was still. Then another snap, this time closer. My heart started beating faster. "Hello?" I called out. Silence. I told myself it was just an animal, maybe a deer. But deep down, I knew better. The footsteps weren't random. They matched mine. If I stopped, they stopped. If I moved faster, they did too. I didn't want to panic, so I kept walking at a normal pace, but my mind was racing. I was in the middle of nowhere, no cell signal, and no one knew exactly where I was. If something happened to me, no one would find me for days. That's when I saw it, up ahead on the trail. A figure standing motionless, half hidden behind a tree. My breath caught in my throat. It was a man. He was wearing dark clothing, and even from a distance I could tell he was watching me. I slowed down, pretending I didn't see him, but my whole body was screaming to run. As I got closer, he stepped out onto the trail. His face was covered by a hood, but I could see a grin. "You're a long way from home," he said, his voice raspy. I didn't respond. Instead, I turned and booked it in the opposite direction. That's when I heard him running after me. I ran as fast as I could, my backpack bouncing against my back, my lungs burning. The trail twisted and turned, and I prayed I wouldn't trip. I could hear his footsteps getting closer. Then, silence. I didn't stop, but I risked a glance back. He was gone. I kept running until I burst into the parking lot. My car was the only one there. Heart hammering, I fumbled for my keys, jumped inside, and locked the doors. As I pulled away, I looked back one last time. He was standing at the edge of the trees watching me leave. I never went hiking alone again. I never believed in crazy cult stories until the summer of 2019. My friends and I barely made it out of those woods alive. It was supposed to be a fun weekend trip. Me, my best friend Mark, his girlfriend Sarah, and my brother Jason. We found a remote camping spot deep in the Smoky Mountains, about 6 miles from the nearest road. The first night was normal. We sat around the fire, drank a little, and told stupid ghost stories. But the second night? That's when things got weird. Around midnight, we heard something moving just beyond our campsite. It wasn't an animal. The steps were too precise, too human. "Hello?" Jason called out. No answer. Then we saw them. Figures standing between the trees, barely visible in the firelight. At least 5 or 6 of them. They wore robes, long and tattered, their faces hidden. "What the hell?" Mark whispered. We grabbed our flashlights and shined them toward the figures. The moment the light hit them, they scattered. No sound, no words. Just gone. We barely slept that night. The next morning, we found strange symbols drawn in the dirt around our tents. Circles, lines, shapes that made no sense. "Dude, we need to get out of here," Sarah said. We packed up as fast as we could, but when we reached the trail that led back to the car, something was wrong. The markers we had left, bright orange ribbons tied to trees, were gone. "Did we take the wrong path?" I asked. Someone removed them," Jason said. Panic set in. We were lost, and we weren't alone. For hours we hiked, trying to retrace our steps. The whole time, we felt watched. Then, as the sun started to set, we saw them again. More of them this time, a dozen figures standing on the ridge above us, silent, unmoving. Jason lost it and pulled a knife from his pack. "You want to go? Come on," he shouted. No reaction. Then, in unison, they all raised their arms, pointing deeper into the woods. It was a warning. Or a command. Screw that. We ran. By some miracle, we found the road just as night fell. When we got back to the car, there were symbols carved into the doors. They had been waiting for us. We never spoke of it again, and we sure as hell never went back. My crazy ex followed me into the mountains. I should have known something was wrong when Emily wouldn't stop texting me after I broke up with her. At first, it was just the usual stuff. Long messages about how she still loved me, how I was making a mistake. Then the tone changed. She started getting angry, accusing me of things I didn't do, saying I had ruined her life. Eventually, I blocked her number, hoping that would be the end of it. It wasn't. About a week later, she started showing up places. The grocery store, my gym, even outside my apartment. She never approached me, just watched. I told myself it was a coincidence, that she was just hurt and would move on. Then, one night, I woke up to find a note slipped under my door. "I know where you go." That was when I got scared. I filed a police report, but they didn't take it seriously. Emily hadn't threatened me directly, and technically, she hadn't broken any laws. So I did the only thing I could think of. I left town for a while. My best friend Jake and I had been planning a week-long hiking trip in the Rockies. No cell service, no distractions, just nature. It seemed like the perfect escape. We drove out to the trailhead, parked the truck, and hiked deep into the mountains. By the second night, we were miles from civilization, camped beside a clear, cold stream. I finally felt like I could breathe again, until Jake nudged me by the fire. "Dude," he whispered, "I think someone's out there." I followed his gaze toward the tree line. At first, I saw nothing, then a flicker of movement, a figure standing just at the edge of the darkness, barely visible in the firelight. My heart stopped. It was Emily. She was wearing a hoodie and jeans, her long, dark hair hanging loose around her face. She didn't move. She didn't say anything. She just stood there watching. "What the hell?" Jake muttered. "How did she—" Before he could finish, she turned and melted back into the trees. I was on my feet instantly. "Emily," I called out, but she was gone. Jake grabbed my arm. "Dude, what the fuck? How did she even find us?" I had no answer. I hadn't told anyone except Jake where we were going. My phone had been off since we got here. There was no way she should have known. But she did. The search. I grabbed my flashlight and started toward the trees. Jake hissed at me to stop, but I couldn't. I had to know what was going on. "Emily!" I shouted, sweeping the beam of light through the dense woods. "How did you get here?" Silence. Then, laughter. A low, eerie giggle that sent chills down my spine. I froze. That wasn't just Emily's laugh. There was something else. Another voice. Jake caught up to me, gripping my shoulder. "Dude, we need to go." More movement in the trees. Not just one person. Multiple. Branches snapped. Shadows shifted. Then the whispering started. It came from all around us. Soft, hushed voices, speaking too low to understand. But I recognized one of them. Emily. I shined my flashlight wildly, but I saw nothing except the endless stretch of trees. The whispering grew louder, overlapping, rising into a chaotic murmur that made my skin crawl. Then, silence. Jake yanked on my sleeve. "We're leaving. Now." I didn't argue. We turned and sprinted back toward camp, my heart hammering in my chest. Every nerve in my body was screaming at me to run faster, that something was right behind me. When we burst into our campsite, we didn't stop. We threw our gear into our packs, barely taking the time to zip them up. Then Jake stopped, staring at the ground. "Dude, look." I followed his gaze. There, in the dirt between our tents, were footprints. Bare footprints. Too small to be Jake's, too small to be mine, and they hadn't been there before. The descent. We left everything we couldn't carry and took off down the trail. We had planned to stay a week, but that didn't matter anymore. We just needed to get out. The hike back should have taken 4 hours. It took 6. Every so often we would hear something, twigs snapping, rustling in the underbrush, that damn whispering. At one point, we saw someone standing on a ridge above us, half hidden behind the trees. Emily. She didn't chase us. She didn't move. She just watched. By the time we reached the truck, the sun was setting. I half expected to see her standing by the vehicle waiting for us, but the parking lot was empty. Jake didn't say a word as we tossed our gear into the bed and jumped in. I locked the doors, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the keys. As we pulled out onto the road, I looked in the rearview mirror. Emily was standing at the edge of the trees, and she was smiling. We drove straight home, barely speaking. I didn't sleep that night. I kept expecting to hear tapping on my window, to find another note slipped under my door. But nothing happened. A week later, I got a call from an unknown number. It was Emily, she said soon. After reporting this, she was arrested.